Hello, I'm Valerie Biden Owens, chair of the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware. Today, I have the privilege of introducing Maryland's Governor Wes Moore, who was sworn in as the 63rd governor in January 2023. He is Maryland's first Black governor in the state's 246-year history and the third African-American elected governor in the history of the United States. Thank you, Governor Moore, for being here with us today on this episode of All Politics is Personal, a program where we introduce the public to the person behind the politician. We know anyone can research your policies and your achievements, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about you. Tell us, if you will, what it was like growing up Moore.
I'm a product of love. I'm a product of high expectations. I'm a product of lessons learned. I am, I'm the son of an immigrant single mom who, my mom actually immigrated to this country from Jamaica.
Oh, okay.
And when she was here, when she was young, very quickly, she found herself forced to assimilate. Where, I know my mother now to this day literally has no Jamaican accent, and she couldn't even fake it if she tried. But she always talks about how when she first came to the U.S., how many of the kids, they told her, the students who she was with, said she sounded dumb with her Jamaican accent. So she listened to the radio and she studied the American accent, and she basically completely absolved herself of her Jamaican accent, of where she had come from. And she says how that was one of the things that she never lost sight of. And I think it's why she always tried to stress for us when we were coming up that be who you are, and don't lose that.
How old was she?
She was, I think she was about 7 or 8, somewhere around.
She was a little girl.
She was a little girl when she first came here. And she always talked about this idea and she always stressed with us that where you are, be comfortable with who you are, because you're perfect as you are, no matter what the world might tell you.
What a lucky man to grow up with such unconditional love and
so true.
confidence.
And I think, because I got into a lot of challenges when I was young. My dad died in front of me when I was just 3 years old. And he died because he didn't get the healthcare that he needed.
I read that you said that your dad died of a treatable virus.
That's right.
And so, yeah, tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's a remarkable thing for you to say and to acknowledge.
And it was hard because also I think at that age, I still didn't fully understand what was going on. My mother actually told me that at his funeral, I actually went up to the coffin, to the where he was laying to rest, and asked if he was coming with us, because I wasn't processing what was going on. I just saw him laying there.
You're not an only child.
I'm not. I have 2 sisters, and I'm sandwiched in the middle. I have an older sister.
The Prince of Peace.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
I was sandwiched.
My son's the same way. Older sister, younger sister, he can't do anything wrong.
But it's funny, that's what my sisters say. I don't think that's right. But that's what my sisters say. They're like, oh, he was always the one, always is the boy in the middle who kind of got away with stuff. But I think that actually...
Because they covered your sins, probably.
Completely.
Yeah.
I have the most wonderful sisters on earth. And still to this day, we have a very, very close relationship. But I do think that actually, in many ways, actually did help to shape and shade some of the things that were going on. Because I did have a really difficult transition when I was younger. I ended up, getting sent away schools, kicked out of school when I was in 7th grade, got sent to a military.
Hence the military academy?
Hence the military academy in 8th grade. When I was 13 years old, I got sent away to a military school. And I had a mandatory year in military school there. But by the end of the first year, I was doing better academically, and I could play sports because I wasn't on probation anymore. And then when my mom said to me, she's like, what do you want to do? You have a chance to come back to school here. She had just moved back to Maryland. My sister was in school in Baltimore. And I said, actually, if it's okay, I'd like to sit tight. And then I ended up finishing school in the military. And why I think that was really important too, why that correlated to what my mom was telling me about being comfortable with who you are. I felt like I was the type of kid who tried to fit in everywhere and wasn't successful anywhere. Where I was living in a community and I was going to school across town at this private school that my mother was literally working multiple jobs to pay for. And I was very quickly finding myself too rich for the kids in my neighborhood
I
who
see.
didn't understand why I had to go to school across town. I was too poor for the kids at school because none of them came from my community, my neighborhoods. And so you constantly found yourself trying to fit in and not being comfortable anywhere. And that's where I think my mother's lesson became so important, where she said, you don't have to fit in. You have to be yourself. And if you do that, that's going to be enough. But I think as a 13-year-old, and what got me sent to military school because some issues I was having, some things I got into, it was very difficult for me to understand that as 13.
You've answered one of the questions that I was going to ask you, which is, was there any refrain? In our house, my parents had a refrain for the 4 kids, Valerie, I don't care what any of the other girls are doing, you're not doing that. Or, your word is your bond. So it sounds like the refrain from your mom, you've answered the question, is just to be yourself, be authentic.
And I think from my grandparents, because also I lived with them when I was younger too. There was one refrain that
Which grandparent?
my mother's parents.
Okay.
And I think that there was a refrain that really sat with me. In fact, they wrote it in the front of a Bible that they gave me before I left for Afghanistan, because I deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division. They wrote just 4 words: "Have faith, not fear." And I think that was a refrain that sat with me for much of my life. That it was really important, because I remember even before I'd go on missions in Afghanistan, I remember sitting there and I'd repeat it over and over: "Have faith, not fear. Have faith, not fear. Have faith, not fear." And it was one of the things that really, I think, helped to serve as a comforter while I was overseas.
You graduate from Valley Forge. You go to Johns Hopkins for international law.
Yes, international relations.
International relations. Okay. You are a Rhodes Scholar, and I believe it was the first Black Rhodes Scholar from Hopkins. You become a captain in the 82nd Airborne. You're deployed to Afghanistan. You come back and you work in President George W. Bush's home, his home in the White House. Um, that's a pretty impressive resume. Is there any part of that there's a story that you could tell about?
It's interesting, because I think for a lot of people, and frankly, I saw this when I was running for governor, where people were trying to understand your journey,
Yeah.
because it's not linear.
Yeah.
It's not obvious. I've been the beneficiary of a lot of people who are willing to invest in me. Frankly, in many cases of my life, even when I don't feel like I deserved it or my actions warranted it. I'm the product of a lot of people who believed in second chances, and in some cases third and fourth chances, but believe they should be worth something. That I have benefited from having mentors in my life and people who have guided me and gave me their best counsel and their best advice, and for people who are willing to vouch for me. And so I think I've just tried to take advantage of the unique opportunities that have been placed in front of me, and just do the best that you can do in those moments and those things. But frankly, I mean, whether it was going from my time overseas in Oxford, to working in finance, to going back to the military and serving with the 82nd, to going, starting my own small business in Maryland, or whether it was running one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in this country, it was never a point that I realized, I thought to myself, oh, this is going to be great when I run for governor, or this is going to be great one day.
Yeah, why not start at governor?
Right. But I didn't realize at the time how much each of those things were actually preparing me for the world. Because each and every one of those chapters in my life, I carry with me. I use them. I've learned from them, and I've grown from them. And I think that whether or not I realized it, each of those things was preparing me for the world.
All right, well, here's a personal question. How the heck did you find time to fall in love and marry Dawn?
Well, I say this was like the best blind date I've ever had, because her aunt met my aunt and uncle, and she was like, "Oh," they were talking about their families, and she said, "Oh, he should really meet my niece. She's involved in public service. She's actually in Maryland right now." I just started grad school at the time, and my uncle calls me up and he's like, "Hey, I met this person. You should really meet her niece." And I'm like, "Okay, great. That sounds really
Yeah,
wonderful. Hey,
yeah.
thank you."
She's got a great
She's got a great
personality.
personality.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
really nice.
yeah.
And then so I'm like, "Okay, fine." I was like, listen, I'll give her a call." So I give her a call. At that time, she was working on a campaign of a candidate who was formerly running for governor, a woman named Kathleen Kennedy Townsend,
Yeah, I remember
Bobby
that.
Kennedy's
Yeah,
daughter,
yeah.
who ran for governor here in Maryland, who's a wonderful, wonderful friend still. And so I'm like, "Okay, listen, why don't we grab coffee?" Because I was like, coffee can be done in 15 minutes. If you need coffee, be done quick. That's actually one of my dating advice I give to people: start with coffee because it can be done quick if you need it to be.
And
And
then when it blows up, take that vodka.
and
Cheers.
that's right.
Yeah.
And that coffee turned into 5 hours where I was just completely captured by her. And not to mention the fact when she first opened the door, I was like, "Oh, well, hello."
Oh.
I
Yeah.
wasn't expecting that.
Right.
But I mean, it was from the first moment that I was around her. I fell in love with her mind. I fell in love with how she saw the world. I fell in love with how she thought about her place in the world and her contribution to the world. She challenged me. She made me think differently.
How long have you been married?
We've been married for 17 years.
How many children?
2 kids. We have a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And who are just now, as we've now moved to Annapolis, they're transitioning really well. And they're just really good kids.
Yeah.
But they're perfect encapsulations of her, which I love.
Your stories sound like the Biden love affairs, but that there's something to be said about arranged marriages
It is.
or arranged introductions. Joe with his wife, me with my husband, and Jimmy Biden with his wife. We
That's
were
right.
all, you've got to meet this person, and we all kind of,
Okay.
yeah, okay, well, and then one thing leads to another.
Take the introduction seriously because you never know.
Yeah, and that's really true. And I think that the serendipity plays a role in our lives so much more than people give it
They do.
credit for. Or it's we think we're on a path and we're going down this road, and then life interrupts.
It's one of these things where it's like, they say, man plans and God laughs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the plans are already laid out, and all we have to do is be willing to understand and accept those things as they come. It's funny. I remember I once had a student ask me. They said, "Are certain decisions more important than others?" I thought it was such an interesting question, and I thought about it. I said, "Yes, certain decisions are more important than others. The problem is we don't know which ones are which.
Hmm.
We don't know in the moment which one is going to be like that's a decision that could change your life, or that's a decision you're going to forget about in 4 minutes. We don't know. And sometimes the decisions we think are the biggest decisions we're ever going to make are the ones that are so fleeting.
Yeah.
And sometimes the things that we think are just simple decisions will be the ones that will change our trajectory."
How much do you think the role of faith has played in your life?
It's huge. I it's interesting because even though I'm new to the world of politics, and when I first decided I want to do this, we took our first poll. I was polling at 1%. I mean, I say,
Been there.
yeah, right, exactly right, within the margin of error, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm not voting was polling higher than Wes Moore in our first poll. I mean, this was a very humbling experience. So I knew that if people were going to come on board, it had to be a march of faith. That there was no guarantee I was nobody's front runner. There was no guarantee this thing was going to be real. That this really was a journey of faith. And I think about it where even in context where I know our lawyers continue to remind me about that separation of church and state and that type of thing, and I respect that. I also know this though. I have always been, and I will always be a child of God. I speak to God in the morning. I speak to God at night. I said,
But do you listen to him?
and that's the
That's
question.
the question.
'Cause I know, and I still, he's always speaking to us. The question is, are you listening?
Are you
He's
listening?
always giving you
Hello?
the guidance.
Yeah.
You got to listen though. But I do. It's something that serves as a core foundation for me. And I know that in my greatest moments, I give thanks. In my toughest moments, I give thanks because I just know that, in the words of Psalm 62, when my heart is heavy, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And I just know for me what my rock has always been. And so faith is something that it plays deeply into how I view the world. It plays deeply into the decisions that I make. It plays deeply into the things that we should be doing, both as human beings, but also for people who are sitting in these seats for a period of time.
Great responsibility. As
It's a great
Kierkegaard said, faith sees best in the dark.
Yes.
And I know personally, I need something bigger than myself to hold on to,
That's right.
because when you reach, you have to risk.
Yes.
And the more successful you become, the harder it is to risk
it is.
because you got a lot more to lose.
You got a lot more to lose.
You got a lot.
I remember I had a mentor who once told me that too, which is a really interesting way of putting it, and I love the way you framed it. But he talked about this idea of I just received the Rhodes Scholarship, and he told me this joke that he said, Rhodes Scholars are people who have great futures behind them.
Oh,
And he said, one of the reasons that he was saying that, he said, because it's almost like the more you move, the more you have to lose. So therefore, the smaller steps you take.
yep.
And I thought that was really interesting. And again, he said, my hope for you is that you never stop taking big steps.
Well, you listened. What motivated you to get into politics? I mean, you didn't climb the ladder. You just went for governor.
Yeah.
And talk about reach and risk. What flipped the switch to, at that time, just I'm going to go for it? What?
I had worked with elected officials for a long time on different issues because, like, for example, when I became the CEO of Robin Hood, which is one of the largest poverty fighting organizations, we did a lot of work because philanthropy can do but so much. But oftentimes philanthropy, what you're doing is you're filling the holes that policies have left. Dr. King had this great quote, and actually it sat on my desk when I ran Robin Hood. It said, philanthropy is commendable, but the philanthropist can never forget the economic injustice that makes philanthropy necessary. That the reason that people invest in organizations that support housing insecurity is because there's so many people who are housing insecure. The reason that we have nonprofit organizations that support education for kids is because we have so many kids who aren't getting a proper education. So even though we worked a lot with elected officials, I remember there was one time I was working with a former governor, and we were talking about child poverty, because child poverty very much is my why. And we were talking about things like the child tax credit, which I was very proud of the president for getting the child tax credit passed, because it has such a direct impact on child poverty rates.
Right.
And I talked to this former governor, and I said, you should do it in the state because you literally cut the rate in half of the kids in your state. Told him you should announce it in the state of the state. Here's a line you could use. And I got an advanced copy of the state of the state, and there was nothing in there about child poverty and nothing in there about the child tax credit. So I'm a little upset. And I call up my head of public policy, and I'm venting. And finally, when I breathed, he said to me, listen, we'd worked for 6 months to try to get him to include a line in the speech. But what if you could write the whole speech? And that's the point. And I remember I gave my first state of the state 3 weeks after I was inaugurated as governor. And we had a whole section in the speech about child poverty. We had a whole section in the speech about the child tax credit. We had a whole section in the speech about how we're going to make the most aggressive bipartisan assault on child poverty in our state's history. And we've done that.
You practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach. And you were clear about where we were going. And I do think that's a core part of leadership, right? Is that as long as the leader is clear about where we're going, people will move in that direction. They'll understand the intent. In the military, we call it commander's intent. You got to lay out commander's intent. And so when we said we are going to end child poverty in our state, And then we started doing things like making the child tax credit permanent in our state, having an enhanced earned income tax credit, raising a minimum wage, passing legislation called the Enough Act, which stands for Engaging Neighborhoods, Organizations, Unions, Governments, and Households, which is a first of its kind platform where we're making place-based investments in the areas that have had generational child poverty. So we've backed it up. But the thing is, people needed to know where we're going. And I feel like that's the role of leadership. You got to let people know where we're going. And if you do that, people will understand the assignment.
Well, you sure and heck lay out a clear path for, and you have people following you. What I have to do now, because we have a limited time, and I have some very, very not serious questions to ask
Okay.
you, and rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Okay. What one word would you use to describe yourself?
I say determined.
Favorite movie?
Finding Forrester.
Oh, favorite music?
Hip hop.
Favorite food?
Jamaican food.
Do you have a hidden talent?
I'm actually a very good cook.
What's your birthday? Not the
The year?
but
It is October
date.
15th.
Okay, so that makes you a Libra.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah. Favorite theme song?
You Gotta Be by it's a woman named Desiree.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And if it's your mother.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Favorite vacation spot?
Jamaica.
And if you could have dinner with one person, whether dead or alive, who would you sit down and have dinner with?
Ooh, that's a great.
I'm available.
Yeah. I was saying, what are you doing this evening? Thurgood Marshall. I would. He's got such not an amazing story, and he's a Baltimore guy, and I would love if one day that would be a dream. To have
Maybe
that
my
chance.
father would join you, because my late father, because he's a Baltimore guy too. He was born in Baltimore.
I love the president, so every time the president, when I see the president, he's always asked a single question: How's Baltimore? How's Baltimore?
Well, I know how you are, which is a very spectacular and thoughtful leader. And I appreciate you, and I think you understand to the core that all politics is personal. Thank you for being with us.
God bless you.
God bless.
Thank you.
And thank you to our partners, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. And remember, all politics is personal.